I'm Sarah Thomas. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Teaching Without a Book. Today's episode is part 2 of a free mini workshop broken into modules and delivered as a 3-week series. In this workshop, you'll learn about something that I call a student learning pathway. And this is a teaching strategy that supports differentiation, personalized learning, and blended learning in your classroom. I gave you an overview of learning pathways and some ideas on how you could implement them or use them in your own classroom. We also explored an example of a science learning pathway together. So if you haven't seen part 1, I do recommend going back and watching Differentiating with Student Pathways part 1 before you watch this part 2 video. So today, we're going to work together to build a pathway step by step so that you can see how to do it from start to finish and begin creating your own amazing student pathways. Next week in Module 3, I will share some of my secrets for making them extra engaging, as well as cover some of the tech tools that you'll see me using today. So let's get started.
So for me, before I even really sit down to start creating my pathway on my computer, so the digital piece of this, I like to first sort of sketch out what I'm going to be doing. And so for that, I've created a learning pathway planner. And this has really helped me to stay organized in my thoughts, and then it makes the creating part of it a lot easier. So here's the first planning page. At the top, you can see a space for the pathway title in the content area. Under that, I'm going to choose the objective of the pathway that I'm creating. So it could be new content, spiral review, expanding on content, maybe a project for an independent or a group project, problem-based learning. It may even be an assessment or homework or something other than any of those that I may not have thought of. So under the objectives, you're going to see focus group, and that's simply just the group of kids that you have in mind as you're building the pathway. So last week's example of the science pathway, that would have been all of my kids. But in the learning path that we're going to be creating today, I would be making a differentiated version of that because it's independent work for an ELA block, which means that I have students who are in different places. And so I'm going to create differentiated pathways. That way I know I'm aligning all of the activities with the skill set that each of those groupings of students is needing to either work on or be closing gaps or even providing some enrichment for them. Under the top box is now the path sequence. So this is like each of the different steps, the sequence of the pathway. And I created a box for each of the different steps or tasks. They're the same thing. And so you can put task number 1, what standards is it covering? What is the activity going to be or the learning task? And then if I have any resources that I might need, because again, learning paths do not have to be strictly virtual. I like to use them as a hybrid so that some of the activities are going to be digital based, but then different steps along their pathway are going to have them get up and move to a different part of the room to complete something or to grab materials or manipulatives to be able to complete a more hands-on activity. It can strictly be digital if you want it to. Again, it goes back to that objective, back to the needs of your students. Okay, so let's build a learning path. So I do mine in Google Slides, and that's just because I've worked in Google Schools, but you can totally use Microsoft PowerPoint as well. To access Google Slides, I go through the waffle and I choose Slides, and I'm going to pick a blank document. And you can see over on the right side that there are all these different themes you can choose from to change the look of your slide. So if you wanted to step it up from like super basic to a little spiffy, then you could just choose from these themes over here on the side. The example we looked at last week of the science pathway was a little more fancy version, and you can learn how to do that from me by watching my video on how to make resources. But for the sake of building a pathway today, I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on just the structure and how to actually create one of these amazing tools. So I'm going to get rid of these themes because I like to start from scratch. We're going to build an example of a pathway that might be used in an ELA block. So maybe during a time when you're teaching guided reading and your students are doing independent work. And actually this learning path is sort of going to take the place of what a playlist would maybe look like. So like a series of must-do activities followed by some may-do activities, or if they finish the required activities that you want them to do. So the title of this is just going to be ELA Learning Path. And just for the sake of being organized, I'm going to add a date. And this might just be the start date. So maybe the Monday of the week that you're going to get it started. And that's just for organizational purposes. The more playlists that you start to create, you're going to want to keep organized maybe in a folder by month so that you can always like recycle them every year. You can just adjust the text and the activities as you need to. And then that way you're just not starting from scratch. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File and I'm going to go to Page Setup, and I change it from widescreen to standard. And that's just because I do make mine kind of fancy. So sometimes the backgrounds that I use, they get distorted if it's in the widescreen mode. And so this is simply a personal preference for the way that I know it's going to best meet my needs. You can do these in a widescreen and that's going to be just fine. So if you remember from our example last week, the first slide was a title page or a cover page. So we're going to just simply do the same thing right here. So I'm going to get a text box. So I just might call it something simple like my learning path. And then I'm going to just make sure I differentiate between the different topics or subjects, because again, if you're using a lot of these, you just want to make sure that you help your students to stay organized and to be able to recognize if they're in the correct one. And then I also do like to add the date. So like week of 7/20 through 7/24. So I'm just going to kind of go through and adjust this a little bit so that I can change the text to a little bit different formatting so that it looks like a little bit more title pagey. Okay, and that looks pretty good. We're just going for basic, we're going for simple. In our example last week, the second slide was an outline of all the steps that they were going to have to do to get through their entire learning path. The learning path that we're creating today is going to be something that walks the students step by step through a week of independent work. And so that's different than walking them step by step through an entire like learning cycle of new content, new learning, practice and self-checking, and then a performance of understanding. This learning path that we're building together today is for spiral review. It's what you would maybe use like your centers for. It's a very similar tool to what a playlist would be, the function of a playlist would be. So I don't need to give a whole outline because each day is going to have different activities that are just spiraling and helping them have access to practicing standards that they've already mastered or that they are close to mastering and might just need a little bit more practice on. So I'm not going to actually outline all the steps for them, but what I am going to do is still provide some of that support. You might remember when you clicked on the frog that it brought you to a video with a fox talking, giving them some pointers on how to complete their pathway more successfully. And it was just all things that had already been pre-taught to them, but just to provide that extra reminder that was embedded into their independent activity. So again, the front loading is worth it because it keeps them more successful without you. And while you're teaching small groups, you really want to make sure that your students can do the best they can on their own without having to interrupt you. So I'm going to just add another little text box, and it's going to be written directions one day at a time. And then maybe putting in a little reminder about remember, always ask 3 before me. And this will just help them to remember that the expectation is that they do ask 3 friends if they have questions or get lost or just aren't sure how to do something. You can absolutely put a video like I did in the example from last week. And if you wanted to do that, all you need to do is go to Insert and choose Video. And from your Google Drive, you can pick out any videos that you would have previously recorded. Maybe I'll just grab this video. It has nothing to do with this pathway, but just as an example. And so then the video would be right there. And then you can have the directions say, watch the video. So now we're going to add a slide for each day of the week. So I'm going to start by creating Monday, and let's make it bigger. And we can make it look a little bit more heading-like. If you click on the word and the text box comes back, once the text box is highlighted, you can fill it with a different color, however you want to do it. I like to do the black and white. So at this point, what I want to do is I'm going to make a copy of this slide for the rest of the week. And that way I don't have to redo this formatting. So to do that, I'm going to go over here to the left and click on Monday. This is the slide that I want to copy. So I can either go up to edit and copy and then click underneath it and go back to edit and hit the paste. And there will be another slide there. Or I can simply do Command C if you have a Mac or Control C if you have a PC. And that will do the same thing. So it's just a little bit of a shortcut. This one now we want to change to Tuesday. And then again, I'm going to copy and I'm going to come up here and now this can become Wednesday. And then you're just going to finish the rest of the week. So now we have our whole week is already mapped out for us, and it was quick and easy because we just copied and pasted. It saves us time. We are not reformatting. So at this point, I would then refer back to my Pathway Planner. I've left a link to the Pathway Planner for you in the description of this episode. So now this learning path is for spiral review. So I'm going to refer to my standards, and I have for you a reference sheet in my Teachers Pay Teachers store for ELA and math, broken down into the groupings of standards for grades 1 through 6. There's also the grade band standards included there for you as well, and I will leave the link for that in the description of this show. Okay, so just one more time before we get started, I just want to remind you that for today's episode, our focus is just building the structure of a pathway. So how to physically create it, and then how to link different tools or tech resources. I'm not going to explain or show you how to make some of the things that we're going to be embedding into this pathway today, because that's actually going to be next week in episode 3. So it will be during that part that I show you how I made these things and some of the different tech tools that I use. For the sake of today, I've already gone in and I've already created those tools and resources and those things that I needed based on my Pathway Planner so that they would just be ready to go so that I could just show you how to build this pathway. Just stick with me because next week I'm going to make sure that I go through how I do all of these things. So for step number 1, on Monday, I'm going to have my students listen to a virtual read aloud, and then they're going to answer a simple problem and solution question in a Google Doc. I would just put for step number 1 to listen to this story and then answer the questions. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to link all of the things they need to be able to do this activity right into this slide. So first I have to get my story, and I've already decided ahead of time that I'm going to go to YouTube that has many different read alouds, and I'm going to choose a Camping Spree with Mr. McGee read aloud, and I'm actually going to choose this one. This virtual copy of A Camping Spree with Mr. McGee is actually brought to you by Teaching Without a Book's sister YouTube channel called the Read Aloud Project, which is to provide teachers with access to more books and read alouds so that they can expand on their own libraries without having to spend more of their own money. So I'm going to just copy the link by hitting Command C or Control C if you are a PC user, and then I'm going to switch back over to this tab where my learning path is. And now to link this story into my learning pathway, all I need to do is highlight the words that I want to become the link, which will be listen to. I think I'll choose this story will become my link, and I'm going to go right up here to this little chain link, and I'm going to paste that web address into this box by hitting Command V or Control V and then apply. And now it's a hyperlink. So if you hover over it, you can see that right there it will be for when the kiddos get there and they need to click on that hyperlink, it'll bring them to the story. And then they're going to answer these questions. Now we need to get the questions, and like I said, I've already created them, and I just did this in a simple Google Doc, and I'm going to choose Mr. McGee. So one important thing that I do need to mention is to make sure that when you create a Google document that you plan on sharing with your students, you do have to make sure that you share it so that anybody who has the link can have that access. Otherwise, it's going to ask them to sign in or request the access. You're going to go to share, and see right now it says that it's restricted. So we're going to go here to the little drop down arrow, and we're going to choose anyone with the link, and now we can hit done. So now at this point, anyone with that link is going to be able to open that document. And before we embed this link, I do need to just show you something quickly. In this address, you can see the last word is edit. What we need to do is replace that word with the word copy, because if we don't, all of your students will be able to get into the same exact Google document, and they'll be erasing and writing over each other's content, and that is not what we want. It's basically would be like giving them all the same piece of paper, which is not a thing we would do. So to get them all their own copy, you get rid of the word edit, you replace it with the word copy. And now we can copy the whole address and come back to our learning path, and we can create the link the same way we did for the story by highlighting the words that we want to be the link, going to our little picture, inserting by Control or Command V into the box, and then you hit apply. And now I just want to show you that when our kids get there to work through it, they're going to be able to come to the story, watch the story, and then when they come back over here to answer the questions, you can see it makes them force a copy. Would you like to make a copy? And they say, yes, please make a copy. And they click the button and it's going to open up a new Google Doc for them and it's going to say copy. Now I've taught my kids to erase copy and put their name and then they answer the questions. On a Google document, they do not need to submit it. It's just going to be existing. So you're going to get all these copies back and I would suggest just keeping them organized in a file, into a file folder. So yay, so that's task number 1 for Monday. So now we can come in and we can do number 2. I like to kind of space them out a little bit so that it's not too close together. Number 2, so since this first one is a little bit time consuming by listening to a story and having to write, I'm going to give them a little bit shorter of an activity where they're just going to complete a sort. So they're going to complete the word sort. We're going to go to the word sort, which I created in Google Slides. And so it's this verb sort that they are going to read the different verbs and they're just going to sort them into the correct boxes based on the tense. They would just start sorting into the correct categories. Before we go to copy this address to put it into our pathway, we're going to come up to the web address. We're going to erase everything all the way up through the E of edit. So edit is always that word you're looking for. Erase the whole word and replace with copy. Highlight and copy that web address to come here into your pathway. Again, to make a hyperlink, paste it and apply it. And now it will take them to the word sort after it requires them to force that copy. All right, and so let's say that the last activity for Monday is that the students are going to just read quietly to yourself. And that will definitely fill up their Monday. One thing to be thinking about if you're not really sure if your students are going to be able to complete the activities in one day, always err on the side of safety. The difference between a pathway like this and a pathway that we explored last week is that last week they could just continue to pick up wherever it was that they left off. In this pathway, we're expecting our students to get through these activities each day. So whatever you're giving them, it should A, be differentiated to their place of learning so you know they can successfully do it. It's something they've already been taught, so it's not a new skill, and so they should have some of that background, that schema to be able to work through it independently. Always make sure that you're thinking to yourself, okay, I know they could get this done and they probably have a few minutes left over because they may end up having to use the restroom, or there may be transition time where they have to get up and go get resources if they're doing a different sort of activity. So just make sure you're always thinking about that, because if they're not finishing their work, then it's going to start to build up and they're going to get behind. If you are considering all those pieces, then this becomes obviously a management issue, and you would address that like you would any other sort of work or habit management issue. Okay, so now we can move to Tuesday, but I'm just going to copy and snag this little text box here by highlighting it and hitting the Command C and then Command V, and I'm just going to change the text, but then that way I don't have to start all over. So on Tuesday, I think I'm going to have them start maybe at the writing center, so they can go and grab their journal, write an entry in your, let's say, September journal. One of the ways that I provided a consistent and purposeful activity for my students was where there was a journal for every month. They had different prompts that were themed, and it even came with little pictures and keywords. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw the link to that into the description of the video. Okay, so the second thing they're going to do is a phonics activity. They're going to review their sound of the week, the ah sound, and then they're going to complete the activity. To review the ah sound, I've already made in Google Slides a little supporting reteach for them, a series of slides that remind them of the spelling of it, how it sounds, a little video that I snagged off of YouTube that they can watch to hear it, and then it ends with their spelling words. Now this is an example of a document where we do need to make sure it's shared but we don't have to create a version that's a copy. They only have viewing rights to this. They're not going to be editors, so they can utilize the same copy. So we're going to go up and just take that web address, can become my little link, and then complete the activity. So the activity is also in Google Slides, and it's this phonics activity where the kids are going to write their spelling word, and then they can divide it into syllables and write the number of syllables on the right. What you're going to do again is making sure that when it's shared, that anyone with a link can go ahead and use that. But now, because this is an activity where they're going to be typing and manipulating, we're going to come up here and we're going to erase through the word edit Alt, Delete, replace with the word copy, highlight and copy that address back to the learning path, and we're making our hyperlinks. Here's our activity. We're going to link it and apply. So now when they get to this point, they can review by going here and doing the different activities and watching the video, and then they can do their activity, which will ask them to force their copy, and they will say yes, and it will open up a copy just for them. And there you go. And so maybe the last thing that I had them do for Tuesday is they're going to just answer a couple of questions in a Google Jamboard about the book that they're currently reading. So answer these questions about the book you're reading. Now I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to go to my waffle, and I'm going to go to Google Jamboard. So they have 3 questions. What is the title of your book? Is it fiction or nonfiction? And to just write a short summary of what they've read so far. And I'll show you how all that works in our next episode. But what's nice about the Google Jamboard is that it is collaborative. So the kids, as they answer questions, will be able to come in and see what their friends are saying and sort of read a little bit about what their friends are reading. And then they can make choices based around maybe what books they want to read next. When you share a Google Jamboard, it is a little bit different than the rest of them. So in order for it to be collaborative, they all have to be able to add their Post-it notes to the same Jamboard. So when you go to the link to make sure that anyone with the link has access, you want them to be able to actually edit. So now we're going to go ahead and we're just going to copy and snag the address, and we're going to put it in here to answer these questions, and we're going to make our hyperlink, and it's going to be all set for our kids to be able to do that. You would then just go through and add Wednesday's activities and Thursday's activities, and if you want to do a normal day Friday, you surely can, but I like to do Fun Friday. Fun Friday is not only a motivator for kids to get all of their work done Monday through Thursday, but it's sort of like that buffer zone where students who maybe were not having the best days, like all of us don't always have good days. I know I am not always the best little worker bee on certain days. It also gives students who may have been absent some extra time. And like I said, it really does encourage our students to work hard and get their work done so that on Friday they can do all their fun stuff. So really this is where our may-dos come in. So Monday and Tuesday, and then of course Wednesday and Thursday, those are all their must-dos. Those are things that you need to get done. But if you do on Friday, now you can have a may-do day, which is Fun Friday. So I just kind of curate a list of digital resources, but then also a list of things they can do in the classroom. So I'm going to go ahead and design this slide for you by just inserting some of the different tech tools and things that my students love to do that are digitally based. And I'm going to put those on this side of this pathway step, and they're going to become hyperlinks. And then on the right hand side, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add in all of the extra things that they can do that are classroom and manipulative based. Okay, so at this point I have all of my digital ones. So again, I just kind of copy and pasted that text box so that I can make my list over here and not have to start over and just be formatting everything all over again. So now I'm going to insert some of our classroom-based activities. Okay, so now we can do just a little bit of formatting. I really like to kind of do like the rainbow so that each of these hyperlinks is a different color, and you can just do that by highlighting the hyperlink and coming to the text color, and you can just go through and change those. And so some of them are a little hard to see. We can just come here, and if you highlight the text box, and you can just do a fill color, and then it will help to kind of make them pop a little bit. So maybe we'll help it match. We're going to do black in between. You can also put like spaces between them, and then that will also help them kind of stand out a little bit and help them to, see the text a little bit easier by adding more spaces. And so we can do the same thing over here too. If we wanted to do another fill, we could just change the text to white and then fill the box black so it's all matchy. I know I said I wasn't going to do this. I'm a liar. Okay, so, and then this is just activities that they can do in the classroom that you already have pre-taught and are just things that they know that they can do. So when they get to the Fun Friday, these are their choices. They just sort of get to engage in these activities, and it just is a nice little motivator. Next week, when we get together for episode 3, we're going to explore these different tools. We're going to check out some of these websites. I'm going to show you how to build some of the things that we've utilized specialized in both the science pathway and today's pathway, and hopefully that will give you the foundation and the skill set to be able to create your own learning path, but to do it so that it is boosting your students' engagement.
Okay, so at this point, I hope all your little teachery creative wheels are just turning with ideas for how you can use this to transform your teaching. And I would really love it if you could take a few minutes just to leave some comments so that you can share some of the ideas that you've been having as we're working through this content together. How will you use the student pathways? What are some of the ways that you're thinking they might work for you and your students, maybe your grade level or content areas? And also just a reminder that the links to all the freebies, they can all be found in the description for you as well. Please use them to help you get started. So thank you all so much for joining me again today and watching this video all the way to the end. Next week, we're going to explore some of the tech tools that you saw me use here today, as well as discuss strategies for ensuring that your student pathways are high impact and really engaging for your students. If you found today's content helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to the Teaching Without a Book YouTube channel so that you don't miss out on any innovative ideas. Go use those creative brains to transform education, and I'll see you next week.